And here's the thing. How do you currently rate Boris Johnson's government? Having a pop at the government of the day is, of course, a national sport. It always has been, always will be, regardless of your politics. In a curious way, we should kind of celebrate the idea that we can be robust and critical about those charged with running our institutions and our lives. There are many places around the world, of course, where the mere hint governmental criticism would land you a hefty prison sentence and several years of hard labour. So let's rejoice that we can have a right royal pop at our political masters. But something has absolutely changed in recent years, and social media is the game changer. Not only have these platforms given the conch to those who previously never had a voice, but it's also accelerated and amplified those who already did. Columnists, actors, politicians alike line up to preen their self-righteous whiskers on a digital stage. They are far more outrageous, controversial, rude and robust than they would be if they were appearing, I don't know, on the lunchtime news, for example. We've now bred a culture of digital rage. It's no longer about proffering your views on a point of disagreement. We are now talking full-on venom and bile being spewed over those who have the audacity to sing from a different hymn sheet. The Tories have always suffered from this more than Labour. When we write off the socialists, you tend to just say they're incompetent or laughable. When we write off the Tories, they're evil, nasty, with nefarious intent. They only look after their own. They look after the rich. They eat poor people for breakfast. They do a merry gig when desperate people fall on harder times. This is, of course, all nonsense, by the way. I've never met a single person who thinks any of those things. I've never met a Tory who thinks any of those things, and you won't find any evidence to support it. I promise you can look. You probably think you can, but you won't. Right now, of course, though, we're in different territory. How do you rate the current Boris Johnson government? He's been in power for little more than a year. In that time, he's had to finalise a way to get us out of the EU, battle with the greatest health pandemic that's ever hit planet Earth in recent times, and all the subsequent problems that followed, most obviously from this week, the A-levels, the recession news as well. Despite the fact that people said they wouldn't play politics with coronavirus, this is fascinating. They've now done exactly this in the most spectacular fashion. I didn't think it would last, because we had about 2 weeks, didn't we? Even the likes of Dennis Skinner would be supporting the Tory government. Everyone's very sensible about this in their efforts to battle the global pandemic. Oh, absolutely right. We're not going to carve this one down political lines. We'll all get behind the government. It took no time at all for that to change and the whole story to become political. The gloves were off. And now those who hate the Tories hate them in the most spectacular fashion. I think the Tories have done okay, by the way. I can't imagine, and this is my point on this, I can't imagine any other party doing anything differently there might be some tweaks here and there, but broadly speaking, if you consider where we're at, the obvious example is the lockdown, isn't it? The initial lockdown. Boris Johnson now widely criticised for not locking down sooner, but absolutely nobody at the time, think back to that time, absolutely nobody was saying anything different. I never once heard Keir Starmer urging the government to lock down sooner. I never once heard the xenophobes at the SNP telling him to lock down sooner. In fact, they followed the same advice. Now, I want to speak to you on this. If you're a natural Tory voter who thinks the government are doing okay, or you're one of those who's gone running to the hills, devastated by your life affiliation to the Tory cause going wrong, I want to hear from it. It doesn't matter where you sit on this one. I'd like to hear your views. I was looking across, just cursorily, looking across some of the comments that are out there at the moment in terms of the Conservatives, the wicked Tories, and what they're up to. Just have a listen to some of this, okay? So these are an ordinary, sensible Chris Addison, a comedian, thick of it guy. I sort of know Chris a little bit. The worst government of my lifetime. Right. How old's Chris Addison? Mid-40s, 50, something like that. So he'd have lived through, probably has a very base experience of the socialism of the 70s. He'd have gone through Thatcher, through Major, through Brown, Cameron, Blair, the worst government of my lifetime. Piers Morgan, the UK has suffered the worst coronavirus death toll in Europe and now the worst recession in Europe. This would suggest we have the most incompetent government in Europe. Keir Starmer, you'd expect nothing less. The government's chaotic and incompetent handling of this year's exams risks robbing a generation of their future. Philip Pullman, the author, in terms of both the sheer number of students affected and the crushing unhappiness and life-changing consequences, this is all down to the government's frivolous incompetence. Irvine Welsh. Man alive, Irvine, look a little closer to home, fella. You have to admire the government's ability to practice endless incompetence and sheer... I can't read this. I'd love to read it out. You can imagine how Irvine Welsh describes the government. But it's got all of those naughty, mucky words in. Messing up Brexit as well as signposted... messing up Brexit was well signposted, and COVID was just laziness and stupid. But the downgrading of exams for everyone but toffs... Everyone but toffs, really? Is a masterstroke. I didn't see it coming. Really? Everyone but toffs. James Melville. Through gross negligence and incompetence, the government have created the worst of both worlds, the worst coronavirus death rates and the worst recession in Europe. This is mostly nonsense, by the way. I could talk all of these narratives and comments off the shelf in one fell swoop. Krishnan Guru Murthy, the impartial Channel 4 newsreader. And just like that, the lead story became French quarantine instead of the unfair exam fiasco. Mate, you work in a newsroom, fella. Change it, Chris. Change it. Dr. Minal Viz. I would give the government a D for their handling of the exams fiasco, but they'd probably upgrade it to an A because they went to Eton. Now, I know this is only social media, and I know it's only a handful of people, which is why we want to put the question to you. How do you rate Boris Johnson's government? And I'm thinking in particular in the last 3 months, because I do see people on social media say, I was a natural conservative and now I'm not, or I was one of those that was Labour all my life at the last election. I went for it. I was the convert. I held my nose. I took the plunge and now I regret it. Or maybe the other way round. I don't know what the critics are looking for. Did somebody think there was going to be some rip-roaring, jubilant news coming out of a global pandemic? Is that what we were waiting for? We're waiting for some... it won't be long before the happy headlines around coronavirus will be here. Well, that's really, by definition, not going to happen. 0344 499 1000. How do you personally rate Boris Johnson's government and how they have dealt with recent events? So, coronavirus, obviously. I've no idea. I mean, I can explain the recession. The fact that recession was... No, hang on, let's rephrase that. The fact that the contraction of GDP was a little worse than Spain would mostly be explained by the fact we're a service economy and all services closed for the last 3 months. End of economics lesson. If you want to be not even pedantic, just factually accurate about it, we're now looking to be the fastest out of that recession because the last month saw growth. So that would explain that away. So I'm not sure how we can blame a recession on Boris Johnson. As for the A-levels, I'm not absolutely sure that we can, with a straight face, say whichever system they had chosen. I mean, the Scottish government, Scottish administration, not really a government, administration council up there, they essentially did the same thing and then did a huge reverse ferret on it because they decided, oh, crikey, there's no house points in this. We're riding high in the polls at the moment. We've royally mucked up with our younger base. What do? Let's give everybody high marks, which, by the way, is equally as inauthentic as giving lower marks. There's no house points to be had by simply giving students a better grade, one which they have no real idea whether they would have got anyway. So that doesn't make it any better. It might be great news if you're thinking, I fancy a nice, nifty, swift 3 A stars. But it doesn't authenticate you any more than it does by going the other way. So whichever one they'd have picked, they'd have been damned if they do, damned if they don't. I'm not suggesting that's, happy days if you're one of those that have been downgraded. I would take it again, by the way. I'd use October, take it again, then rejoin university, maybe in January or next year. 0344 499 1000. So just look at... we can I want to factor Brexit out of it, but I don't think we can to a degree, because the more I look at this story, the more I realise that all of those that I kind of just read out, most of those are just grumpy with Brexit. They're really just grumpy with Brexit. It's Brexit that's actually the catalyst for all the anger. So people who were angry at Boris Johnson for Brexit will then be angry for all the other, as short as night follows day. There is no Brexit, there is no Remainer out there that is going to say, yeah, I think the government have done brilliantly over coronavirus. It just simply won't happen. 0344 499 1000. So do you think Boris has blown it? Do you think Boris has done as well as he could have done? I don't know. Again, just think of either Corbyn or Keir Starmer or Nicola Sturgeon in that role, fronting up the whole of the UK. Would it have been any different? Would it have looked demonstrably, distinctly any different? 0344 499 1000. Simple question. How do you currently rate Boris Johnson's government? And I want to hear from you. If you are a die-hard Tory voter who's disappointed, or a die-hard Tory voter who thinks they're doing absolutely right. I'd love to hear from a Labour supporter who would say, do you know what? I don't vote for Boris Johnson, but I can't see what he would have done differently. And of course, hindsight is great, because we can all look back and go, wouldn't it have been great if we'd have closed the borders at this stage or locked down earlier? No one said that at the time. The scientists, the medics didn't say it at the time. And that was the point when the government really did simply take clinical and scientific advice. And everybody agreed on the SAGE committee. It would be too dangerous right now to lock down. And so they waited a little bit. Could they have done it sooner? Retrospectively, yes, but they didn't. Not the only country. The Netherlands, I think, pretty much at the same time followed suit. And of course, if it's about coronavirus specifically, then I don't think we want to get into a competition, do we, about which countries have done the worst. It's marginal, by the way. If you look at Italy, Spain, France, the UK, if you look at Scotland and England, it's all pretty much similar